Hey guys, this is Nick Jamel, and welcome to this next episode, and welcome to the conversation of our generation. I'm just a guy here trying to get involved in the, um, I don't know, I guess what I like to call the conversation of our generation, but I kind of think of it as the dialogue and this incredibly free exchange of ideas that we have now with technology, and um, kind of getting my 2 cents in and trying to get myself to grow as a person and to be challenged and questioned and open up to new ideas as well. And hopefully through this, I can teach some people some things, and hopefully a lot of people can teach me stuff too. So this is early on, and I really don't have a whole lot going on the channel, but I really think that sticking with this and doing this for an extended period of time will hopefully gain traction and really get people in and create a forum where ideas can be discussed freely and civilly with civility, I guess, and that people can learn from each other and grow because we all have different skill sets and different points of view and different perspectives on problems, and sometimes just seeing things from a different angle or hearing about things from a different angle opens up your mind to a whole new world that you never would have anyways. And so that's kind of what I'm doing here. And I have an interesting thing I think today, and it's my take on, well, I recently read the Communist Manifesto. It's about 45, 50 pages, and so it's a quick read. I mean, it's 45, 50 pages. It's not a very big, it's just a little pamphlet. So you can see that. And so I was reading it, and the funny thing that occurred to me was how I think misguided it was, whether on purpose or on accident. Um, because when I look at the things that they're talking about in this and the people who they criticize, I think they were going after the wrong people, and I'll kind of explain what I mean by that. But I want to give you the gist of what it overall is, and I think everyone kind of understands what communism is. But the point of it is that there's an idea in this that the bourgeoisie are the ruling class. Basically, they're a class, and this is written in the 1800s. So the wealthy, like you kind of picture like the people who I picture them going after, like the Carnegies and J.P. Morgan and Rockefeller and these big capitalist giants who really did kind of have a huge say in what was going on in the world because, well, I mean, they had the power, the money, and the influence. And they definitely had a lot of sway in America. And so that's kind of the kind of people that they picture as the bourgeoisie, and they have the nobility included as well. But they say that it evolves, especially in Europe, and I kind of agree that the modern type of socialism that they see evolving comes from feudalism, and the fact that there was a class system that had been engineered over a long period of time in Europe that made people forever poor because there wasn't class mobility really in Europe for a long time, and that wasn't because of, it wasn't because people were rich as much as it was because people were powerful. And, the money I think came with power, and they kind of intertwined a lot, but you could see mobility among the merchants and the guildsmen and all those kinds of people, that you could gain power and influence in your sphere by having merit and by being good at your job. So those are kind of the classes they have, is the bourgeoisie and the proletariat. And the proletariat is the serfs, it's the oppressed, it's the people who, it's the wage laborers as they call them as well. The people who supposedly are the columns that hold up the bourgeoisie. And I think there is some truth to the fact, obviously, that you can't have Walmart without their cashiers, obviously. You can't build large amounts of wealth without using other people's labor, because you need labor economically it requires labor and productivity to create something that can be then bought and sold. People forget that the driving force behind an economy is not consumption, it's production. It doesn't matter how much money you have in the economy, if no one makes anything, then it can't grow. And if nobody innovates and creates better ways of making things, then it's not going to grow. And we can have another episode about that where I show how that works, that increasing production actually increases people's livelihood, or increasing productivity of a single person through capital actually does increase that person's livelihood. So that's kind of where they're coming from with the classes. The idea is that the bourgeoisie basically prey on the wage earners and the wage laborers and the proletariat, and it is the proletariat who need to rise up, overthrow the bourgeoisie, and establish, equality, basically. And so they do that. I can give you the 10 steps here. The 10, in the most advanced, it says, nevertheless, in the most advanced countries, the following will be pretty generally applicable in order to establish, a communist regime. And some of these will sound very familiar, even in America. Abolition of property in land and application of all rents of land to public purposes, so public ownership of land. A heavy progressive or graduated income tax. I would say that sounds very familiar. Abolition of all right of inheritance. Well, when the death tax isn't all right of inheritance, but it's a lot. And the confiscation of the property of all immigrants and rebels. So centralization of credit in the hands of the state, Federal Reserve, by means of a national bank with state capital and an exclusive monopoly, Federal Reserve. Centralization of the means of communication and transport in the hands of the state. I don't think we see this on a national level. Obviously, like airplane and cars and all that are very free, but in the city you see this big time, with mass transit, and you always see this in cities that are, much more left of the aisle. Extension of factories and instruments of production owned by the state, the bringing into cultivation of wastelands, and the improvement of the soil generally in accordance with the common plan. So the state ownership and state planning of agriculture and the economy and everything like that is kind of what it is. So I think a lot of this kind of actually the National Parks Department does a lot of this, and definitely regulations on farming and zoning and all that is huge with this. Equal obligation of all to work, establishment of industrial armies, especially for agriculture. So, same thing pretty much. Combination of agriculture with manufacturing industries, gradual abolition of the distinction between town and country by a more equitable distribution of the population over the country, which I think is weird. Getting people out of cities and spreading them out. I don't know. I guess it probably would work. If you picture people being much more small community, I think kind of like almost like Jefferson kind of proposed something similar to this. I think this is a lot different in the way that they're proposing it, but being able to regulate yourself and your area around you, I think is, but obviously they're talking about the state distributing it and planning it that way. Free education for all children in public schools, abolition of child factory labor in its present form, combination of education with industrial production. So the first part there, I think the free education for all children in public schools is definitely if you look at any communist regime, it's a way to indoctrinate people. I'm not going to say that that's heavily what's going on in America, but I do think that there's definitely, if you look in the last 50 years since the Department of Education and over the last probably 70 to 80 years as, the government's got more involved in education, or the federal government's got more involved in education, you've seen it be dumbed down a lot. It's incredible. Right now, I think I heard the latest statistic was about 50% of kids who graduate high school from Chicago schools are illiterate. I mean, that's horrible. I mean, that was during the Harlem Renaissance. It was much better, the literacy rates for black kids in that area. I mean, and that's just, if you look at, I mean, that's where Malcolm X comes out of it. Like, horrible things were going on. You know, I mean, they had a revival and a good cultural shift that helped, but it wasn't like those people were well-to-do or anything. They just were hard-nosed. You know, Thomas will talk about it. You know, you miss a word on a spelling test, you write it 20, 30 times. If you miss a math problem, you go over it 20, 30 times until you get it right. And that's the kind of things that they're not drilling into kids who need it the most, you know. So there's that. And then also the combination of education with industrial production. And I think that's where it's, you know, it's preparing people to be workhorses rather than to be creative and to be, you know, entrepreneurial and all that. You know, the point of, you know, making it industrial is that, you know, you learn how to work in a factory rather than be a productive, you know, member of the state rather than, you know, and by productive, it's like be, you know, a button pusher in a factory. They want to teach you that rather than teach you all the world of what it could be. And so that way they can keep you in your lane, kind of, is what the communists want. They want conformity and uniformity out of everybody. So that's kind of what that's where they're coming from with this, and so that's what their action plan is. And I think the funny thing about it is now and they blame the bourgeoisie or the capitalists, you know, like I said, but they really describe them as the people who are out of touch with the wage laborers. They assume that they're capitalistic and that their ever-changing of the means of production is keeping people down, which economically, you know, is not true. The more you improve the means of production by capital, you actually improve people's livelihood, because if they can produce more in their hour, like if they can run 2 machines at once, then generally they get paid more, they produce more, and the growth of the economy and the growth of that person's, you know, that's why now, you know, because of increased productivity, the poorest of the, like, I mean, even really poor people, most of the people who are considered poor in America have air conditioning and a cell phone. Whereas, you know, 150 years ago, about 150 years ago, most people didn't even have, like, actually pretty much no one had indoor plumbing or electricity. Definitely not both. So that's kind of where I think they're where they're very, very misguided, is that the bourgeoisie and the people who are out of touch are capitalistic rather than just the kind of like that noble class. And I think that there is kind of that idea of like a noble class. I think like our celebrities are like that. I mean, you know, the Kardashians are really out of touch, probably, I think, with how most people live. I mean, I think Hollywood are kind of almost like a modern bourgeoisie, because they don't understand how people live at all. Like, they could not have a conversation with me, I don't think, about my actual life and understand like the things that I go through. And I'm not I'm not poor. I mean, I grew up pretty well as a kid. I mean, I'm middle class, you know, and I think that there's even like, you know, like the upper middle class kind of people who are generations of doctors kind of are out of touch as well, you know, because they're not capitalistic. They just are doctors. They're smart people, and they just have been decently wealthy for a few generations, and they just don't remember what it's like. Whereas I think capitalists have to be very in touch with what's going on, because you don't make money off just the rich. I mean, contrary to what people like to say, like, you know, you have to be in touch with the poor. You have to be in touch with the middle class, because that's where actually a lot of the consumption comes from. Actually, most of the consumption in our country comes from. And so that's, I think, where the bourgeois or the communists are out of touch with what's actually happening. And I think that the modern, almost bourgeoisie, the people who are really keeping people down, aren't capitalists. and I'm not saying that there are capitalists who, or that there aren't any capitalists who, abuse power. And I think anytime that you abuse power to get regulations in place for yourself or things like that, that those are anti-capitalist. When big companies propose regulations that will help them gain a competitive edge through government monopoly, I think that's not capitalistic at all. I want free commerce, and I want big companies to have to compete based on merit, not based on being able to lobby, having the money to lobby Washington. So I will like to make that clarification. But I think the people who are most out of touch are the people in these big city, like especially on the coast, California, big cities, New York, Baltimore, and Chicago even, that they don't understand because they've never had to interact with average people, because the big cities are not the average, believe it or not. And so it says in here, the bourgeoisie has subjected the country to the rule of the towns. Now, I think that sounds really familiar, and I think that's actually what this last election was really, really about. And I know this kind of got me a long time to get around to this, but, I think that's one of the biggest things is the bourgeoisie are not limited to a class. It's people who are out of touch with the common man. And right now in America, the common man wants freedom, liberty, and to be able to be creative and entrepreneurial. I think that's really what we want, is to be able to be in control of our destiny. The average person doesn't want a handout in America. That's not our values. The average person in America wants to make their own life their own way. And I would much, much rather be a free poor man than a middle class person who has no choice in life. And I will say that every day. I would much rather have the chance to do what I want and explore a whole new world of, starting a business and, learning and growing, and the possibilities and endless possibilities, and maybe fail and be poor than to live comfortably and be forced to be, whatever, middle of the road job that, I'm prescribed by my government, and I think that's where, the push to everyone go to college really, because it pushes us into, it really does, I think, push us into a mindset that you have to get a certain type of job. It can't be a creative job. It can't be something that you're passionate about, really. It's, you got to go to high school, go to college, get a degree, and then you get a job, and, then you save up some money, and you go through the walk, you go through the steps and go through the processes. And that's, I don't think, what Americans really, really want. And so when you go against what the majority, well, not even the majority, what the common people want, then you're going to find that it's going to have a backlash. And I think that's what 2016 was about. And I'm not a Trump fan at all. I think, he's better than our other option was. I'm going to be honest right now, but I didn't like either of them. I don't like anybody in the federal government, really. So I'd just like to make that qualifier. Anybody who works in Washington and tells someone halfway across the country what to do in their personal life, I just don't think that they're really in touch with what's going on. And I don't even think that the people who are running for office around me are in touch at all either. I mean, my congressman is Andre Carson, whose aunt was my congressperson before him, and neither of them have any understanding of what their district goes through. Like, I'm sure that they came to town halls and talk it up and say what they're going to do and say that they understand where we're coming from or whatever, and they don't have any idea about what our daily life is like here. I know it for a fact that they couldn't, because my district is just decrepit. I mean, it needs so much of a good representation, and everything that they voted for and everything that they stand for stands against helping our district, to be totally honest. If you look at any, and that's another discussion for another day. But those are the kind of people running our country, are people who are out of touch, families of politicians, the Kennedys, Carsons, and so I think the reason why Trump got elected, it was, they like to call it a white lash or whatever. I don't think it was about white people. I think it was about, sadly enough, I don't want to really admit, but I think it was a bit of like, a proletariat, vote against this bourgeoisie of leftists telling me that, if I don't agree with every crazy, critical theory, mumbo jumbo shit that they come up with, that I'm, sexist or racist or whatever. It's just ridiculous. And, there's only so many times that you can, call people a name, over and over again without knowing who they are, or even ever talking to them, calling us just idiots and rubes and blah, 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 and, hicks and hillbillies and all that. Until people say, I'm done with it, you can't just insult us for this much time and, keep us down and, use the federal government to teach us what you want to teach us, and not let us, grow and learn and experiment with our own lives. I still say, like, one of my smartest friends had the biggest, a lot of people, ADHD, anybody, like, he had ADHD or ADD, somewhere along those lines. And so he, the biggest disservice that ever happened to him was government schooling, or like the traditional schooling or government, right? Because he went to private schools, but they're still subject to all the same Core 40 and all that. And he's not a Core 40 kid. He's a tactile person. He's great with his hands, and he's really, really, really incredibly creative, really smart. But if you sit him at a desk and make him do multiplication tables, he's gonna just be like, screw this. But if you, put a computer in front of him, or if you put, like, he could wire speakers. When we were in, like, middle school, he could figure out what was going wrong with the speaker wire, and without it, he'd just look up a video on YouTube and be able to, like, re-engineer that in the same way, and that's the kind of person he is. He's really clever. He's good with computers and that kind of thing. But that kind of intelligence is not welcome, because it's, and as much as I think it's very important to get your multiplication tables and be able to read and all that, I think you can hammer that out and really show people how to apply things and how to be better. And the kids who really are not that kind of person, teach them, how to navigate our world and do their taxes, and, balance a checkbook, and, even if it's not a checkbook, but your digital checkbook, and teach them how debt works and all that. Because the kids who a lot of times are bad with, math, and he's not like this. He's actually really good at navigating the world. As parents taught him really, I think, well on those kinds of things. Luckily, because schools weren't going to do that. But, those kinds of things are what people are out of touch with. And, there's no way that you can make New York, California, Indiana, Kansas, Idaho, Texas, Michigan, Georgia, all these different states that are so different in climate and culture and everything, be the same. And you can't make the people, you definitely can't make all the individuals the same that live in these verses. Because me living in Indianapolis, I'm a ton different from just like my family who lives in, like in kind of like, the country-ish parts outside of Indianapolis. And it's not even, like, they're 30 minutes outside of Indianapolis, but it's a whole different world, really, than inside the city. And it's a long cry from my family who lives in Evansville, Indiana, or Tennessee, and we have a lot in common, don't get me wrong, but there's a lot of, cultural differences that you just because of the culture that you're immersed in. And so that's what I think people are out of touch with. And the people who are out of touch are the people trying to make everyone the same. You know, the socialists, you know, the Bernie Sanders kind of people. I think he's actually out of touch because he does. And actually, I think he's a little bit more in touch with what one of the groups is saying. I should say the San Francisco socialist kind of people, like the Nancy Pelosi's. You know, Hillary Clinton obviously was just incredibly out of touch with what America was feeling at the time. You know, so, you know, Maxine Waters has no clue what America really thinks. I don't think she has a clue of what she thinks either. I think she's a loon bag, but so yeah, it's just it doesn't make sense how out of touch they are, and I think right now what I really want to get across at the end of this here, and I want to wrap this up soon, is these people need to. I don't even care. What we need to do is get into, you know, the voting box and vote in people who connect with us and who actually represent our beliefs. Because I want government out of my business, but I am also a pragmatist, and I want to see, you know, it done the right way, with a vote, not a gun, where we take back our liberty by putting in people who are pretty much a part of the proletariat with us. You know, I mean, because I think, you know, the average middle class person is almost like a proletariat kind of person, and I don't want to like use that language as much because I don't really think it's accurate. But the common man in America is not someone who wants equality; it's someone who wants freedom, and so we want to get people in there who are going to protect our freedom and our rights. And I think I think Trump was, you know, a big, that was the jury kind of coming in on this mindset of the leftists. And I think moving forward, we need to kind of follow up on that with real effective people, because I don't think he's going to be effective in much other than slapping around the media. I want people who are going to really, really roll back the role of government in my life. And because right now, government telling me what to do and government looming over my head is not good for me. It's not good for anyone around me. It's not good for anyone, because, I mean, you see the 10 points in there that I read you that are at the beginning of the show. Listen to those and read them. Look them up again, because we're moving in that direction every day, inch by inch. And that's what I'm afraid of, because it's not the capitalists doing this. And that's what everyone's worried about, is the 1%ers or the 0.1% and all these people that Bernie Sanders talks about. And I think he genuinely is misguided in how this stuff works. And I think he thinks he's doing good. Actually, I really do think that out of him. But it's damaging, because the real threat is cronyism. It's people who are actually really out of touch with what the average person wants. It's, you know, it is corporations writing laws and giving them to lobbyists to get signed by Congress. But it's also, and more importantly, the fact that we've let our government get to the point where that's possible, because that wasn't always possible. So that's my thoughts for today on this, and hopefully I can kind of refine this argument, because it was a bit of a ramble. But I just will kind of close it out, and hopefully ask you guys to like my videos, subscribe if you like what I'm doing, and really I hope that people can come in and join in this forum, even if you disagree, even if you don't like what I have to say. Come in and, you know, discuss that with me. If you feel as though you like what I'm saying, add on to it or bring new evidence or whatever your thoughts. Bring questions, bring new ideas and new things to talk about, and let's make this, you know, a forum for the conversation of our generation. All right, have a good one, guys.